Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
Welcome back to the Prime Life podcast, where we dive into the ideas, innovations, and people redefining the future on longevity. If you care about where retirement is headed, what's next in longevity, innovation, and how we build solutions that actually meet people where they are, you're in the right place. This is an episode you won't want to miss. I'm Mary Crean. Let's get into it. The life insurance industry has struggled with a massive protection gap for decades. And my guest has spent his career trying to solve it. Wow. Farron Blanc brings experience from leadership roles at IBM, Aviva, the Boston Consulting Group, reinsurance giant RGA, and Banner Life, one of the country's largest term insurers, as well as the founding and selling of the venture-backed startup Jerry. Today, he's backed to building, this time, a stealth startup merging generative AI and life insurance. Farron, welcome to the Prime Life podcast. It's great to see you again. You and I have worked together in the past, and I saw you on LinkedIn, and I'm like, I need to reconnect with Farron because he's always doing really cool stuff.
No, thank you, Mary. It's great to be here and great to reconnect. And yeah, wow, how the world has changed, since COVID, Gen AI. It's an exciting time to be in our space, in our industry.
Yeah. So since the days of Jerry, and that's my husband's name, so I always laugh when I see it, and he spells it exactly like that. Tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and where your focus is today.
Yeah. So after Jerry, Jerry was focused on helping seniors navigate senior care. Um, as mentioned, COVID dramatically changed that. We were doing it through a data-driven method. And so I got reconnected with Mark Holweger, who is the CEO of Legal and General America, or Banner Life. Um, and we were just talking about how we can help bring more affordable coverage to Americans through intermediate distribution. So I spent this past 4.5 years there with a wonderful team, helping grow the business, growing from number 5 in the US term market to number 2.
Wow.
We doubled the business. And with the acquisition of Meiji Yasuda, kind of made sense. And Gen AI, for me to just take a pause and just rethink through how to future proof, candidly, right? Like, these tools are going to really, really impact our business. They're impacting our customers. They're impacting our distribution partners, our policy owners, our beneficiaries. And so that's what I've been up to for the last, 3-4 months, really earnestly digging deep, thinking through some projects and trying to explore.
So you've spent the last 20 years, as I said earlier, strategy, distribution, and product and marketing in life insurance. So what problem do you keep coming back to? And I know we're going to then talk about generative AI and how that all fits in.
And so, the fundamental problem, right? So the US is a $18 billion life insurance premium market. So it's huge. But half of people, like half of Americans, say that they need more life insurance, right? And the number hasn't moved in a generation. I was having dinner last night with a friend of mine, very smart lawyer friend, and she only had group life insurance, right? Like, she was switching jobs. She's like, oh, I don't have life insurance for this weekend. I'm like, oh my gosh, you need individual coverage, not 2 times your salary, because they have a big house and, and a great, great lifestyle, right? With young kids and a house and a mortgage in Northern California. And so families just aren't being adequately protected. And it's just been going sideways, for the last 30 years. We haven't really moved the needle on that as an industry. So that's the problem that I'm, spending the rest of my career focused on.
So I love that example you gave because I know a few grown adults that I have in front of me that could fit that exact profile pretty much, except location.
Yeah.
Now, these are well-educated individuals. They are They have a good net worth at this point. They have a lot of responsibility. You said a couple of kids, you're a dad and
Yeah.
a husband. What's the missing link? Like, what is it? Is it the marketing that's out there that they're not identifying with? Or is it they really haven't sat down to think, wow, I need, God forbid, something happens to me. I know when we're younger, we don't think,
Yeah.
right? We don't think that way. We think, oh, we're going to live forever. So, in your opinion, where do you see the disconnect?
Yeah. And so I don't think it's a product problem,
Mhm.
right? So, like an insurance product, like we have all flavors of products, right? I mean, yeah, could you do some stuff around the edges? Sure. But I
Right.
don't think there's, some missing formula, right? Like some missing benefit. So I don't think there's that. And then when I see the amount of changes that the industry has done,
Mhm.
to remove friction from the underwriting process, right? Where, it used to take 30 days to get a policy and fluids and labs. Whereas now, again, for simple term insurance, right?
Mhm.
Plain vanilla, most people will get an offer in 20 minutes, five
Right.
minutes, right? Digitally. So I don't think the underwriting friction has been largely removed over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's through the work of machine learning and keeping the prices affordable and, a lot of innovation right there. And so it does sound like a cop out on the marketing side. But what
Mhm.
I'd say is, I think agent productivity, right, has been pretty flat,
Mhm.
for the last, like we've added laptops and cell phones and
Right.
e-apps and drop tickets,
Right.
but fundamentally, the unit economics of giving advice hasn't changed, right? So, like an e-app, yeah, it's a bit easier, right? Same thing with underwriting. It's a bit easier,
Mhm.
but the advice, right? Like sitting down, right? And engaging with, that smart individual when they're ready, when they're giving them personalized advice,
Right.
that hasn't changed. But again, going back to what we've been talking about, right? Why, you know, we wanted to chat about this is Gen AI, I think, is the first thing that does, right? Because now that fundamentally changes the economics of providing advice.
Mhm.
Um, and it's listening, it's translating, it's sequencing. And
Mhm.
so I still think you're going to need humans, right? For
Right.
sure, right? Because like it's such a personal,
Right.
personal advice.
Right.
But I think you don't have to work harder, right? Whereas before, for an agent to make more compensation, they'd either have to reach out to ultra high net worth individuals or mass affluent, or do a ton more volume, right? In terms of meetings and cases and tickets. And so now I think you can spend more hours,
Mhm.
being a human
Mhm.
and serve, that middle market, that mass market, you know?
Right. And I was talking to someone yesterday, and we were agreeing that, especially in the financial services insurance space, trust is huge. It's like the number one thing that we must be able to communicate to others as a carrier, as an agent, a producer, an advisor, whatever that role is. And as you said, it's still that human is still very important. So, can you talk a little bit about why the industry hasn't closed the protection gap and what makes you believe that this moment is different?
Yeah. And I think, again, the honest answer is we couldn't afford as an industry to service a customer,
Mhm.
right? Because again, if you look at it, right, again, I'll stick to term insurance. I know,
Yeah.
a lot of your audience is more on the retirement side. So, but I think the analogy probably works. So you probably just have to map it to MIGAs and
Yeah.
RILAs and all other things. But
Right. Right.
you know, underwriting a $200,000 face amount term policy for a 10-year-old, right?
Mhm.
Like, sorry, not a 10-year-old, a 10-year duration product,
Right.
for a 28-year-old cost the industry roughly the same that it would cost to underwrite and acquire a person with a $5 million, W-2 executive, right? Like a $5 million face amount policy, right?
Mhm.
And again, since it's a $5 million policy, the annual premium will be larger.
Mhm.
So we all kind of we're inclined to chase that executive, right? So I think that story of like they don't want it, right? That gig worker, that, middle market, that $200,000 10-year policy. I think that's a narrative we told ourselves to feel
Mhm.
better,
Right.
but I think people want protection. And so I think that's where we've struggled. And this is why it's different, because AI kind of collapses the underwriting time. It reduces friction, and it also just allows translation simultaneously in marketing, right? So you can do, like, I was listening to a video in Japan on YouTube
Mhm.
with closed captions. I was just asking Gemini to translate that into English, right? And again, like, it translated the transcript. It wasn't perfect, but I was able to follow it. It was like a 7-minute video. It's like, oh, interesting, right? The tools, the models are just getting better and better. And
Yeah.
so now you're opening up these whole opportunities where economically you can reach different pockets that before, as an industry, just given our cost basis and the trust required, it just wouldn't have been feasible.
I love that example, and it's so true. I mean, I think, well, those individuals that don't think they're using AI are really using it. They just don't know it. And those
Yeah.
of us that are using it, I would say the way I describe it as my personal assistant, it's allowing me personally to focus on higher level strategy. You still have to double and triple check things, but it certainly can make so many tasks that perhaps were like time consuming, that were like in the weeds. It can just shore it up and help in a quite amazing way. So you've described life insurance, the 30-year product industry, more like a one-time sale. And I know your example was term insurance, so I understand that. What does it look like? What has it done right? Or
Yeah.
what should it look like to be done right? I should ask.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think, again, the product is, peace of mind, right? And it delivers on the financial promise, right? Because, you know, it's the ultimate act of love. A
Right.
policyholder loves someone, their beneficiary. Maybe it's a business, maybe it's whatever, maybe it's their spouse, their kids,
Mhm.
but they love them. So they're willing to forego financial cost to try to ensure certainty, right? And
Mhm.
then again, for us as an industry, we spend so much time trying to be right there at that moment and make
Right.
sure there's no anti-selection, right? Because again, we have to make sure it's appropriately priced so that, there's so much asymmetric information that, we need to make sure that the person is paying the appropriate price for that protection. But then the next time the family hears from us, someone's died, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
all we've done as an industry is just, debit their bank account for 30 years, 20 years, and that's it, right? And that's the moral failure that's just been dressed up as operational efficiency, right? And so I think AI allows us to be present without being intrusive, right? So, how do we actually help? Do a beneficiary review. When a child turns 18, or how do you really help a family when they're at the worst moment in their life, right?
Mhm.
Filling out a claim form,
Right.
and then you go back and say, "Oh, sorry, we need a notary. Oh, sorry, we
Yeah.
need you to mail this back to us. You wrote the cause of death was X, but the death certificate says Y,
Right.
right?" And or you filled out, the policy. You can't remember the policy ID, this 8-digit string that's 20 years old.
Right.
That's not correct. So, and we just delay that process.
Yeah.
And again, those are things that the industry has done so well at removing on the front end, right?
Right.
On the underwriting side, like removing friction, making sure that NIGO, not in good order, is a thing of the past. But we haven't really done that, on the full life cycle, right? So
Right.
before, during, and after, full policy life cycle.
Right. And in the retirement space, a lot of times we've had guests on who talk about revisiting some of those documents because, as you said, like, you know, at age 18, maybe revisit the beneficiary or whatever, that the documents that need to be revisited, because a lot of times those are not updated. And then individuals are like, oh no, wow. But again, so much time has gone by, we get on with our life. Fortunately or unfortunately, when we take pauses, it's usually, I think, either one extreme or the other. It's like something fabulous is happening. Maybe you're getting married, having kids, or buying a house, or whatever that is, or there is an accident, or there is death, or,
Yeah.
you know,
Or divorce or something like that,
divorce, yeah, some
separation.
transition in your life. But I think also
Yeah.
it's perhaps being able to predict some of those inflection points, which again, I think, when we talk about customer journey, and I love talking to you because you're a marketer, it's so much not a straight line, right? And it's so up and down, and it just it's complex. And when we talk about, carriers, every carrier's out there, right, announcing AI initiatives. What do you think the failure mode is that you're most worried about? And I was pausing yesterday and speaking with someone about companies in general that were really doing well now because they were only focusing on a few things with AI, because they realize they can't focus on everything and do it well. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. So I think, what I've seen is the industry is really, really good at coming up with governance and policy, right? So we all know, and it's great. And I agree, right? Like, I
Mhm.
don't want my PII or my HIPAA information being, exposed or being trained on. So I think universally, every life and annuity company in the United States has a great posture there. And then the next step would be, bolting on a chatbot, right? Or exposing that internally, right? Copilot, whatever it might be. But
Mhm.
I think fundamentally, to your point, that's bolting a chatbot onto a broken process
Mhm.
is like saying, oh, how do we do stuff that isn't even optimal, but just do it faster,
Mhm.
right? And
Right.
throwing more AI slop at the process, right? Where it's like, and so AI, I think you said it right. It's like, a good friend and I, we chat about this. You can outsource your thinking, but you can't outsource your understanding,
Mm,
right?
that's
And
interesting.
so the real question would then be, okay, yeah, so I can outsource my thinking, right? Like I can get a lot of stuff done, right? But if I don't understand what process we're trying to do or what product or services we really want to build, if we are starting today, right, with new capabilities in a blank sheet, I don't think that relationship, right, like our customer relationship, as well as our distribution relationship, right, as a carrier, how we engage with our advisors, with our distributors, our wholesalers, broker dealers, our RAs. Like, I don't think it would be the same relationships, that we had when we're, you know, doing faxes and emails,
Yeah.
well, we digitized the fax form, turned it into email, then you kind of digitize that PDF into, some type of form logic. Um, and so I think the incumbents, right, who don't recognize that in the next half year, in the next decade, and if they're just using AI as like a cost reduction, right, like an opportunity to get rid of case managers or underwriters or licensing staff or customer service, I think
Mhm.
those ones, will be the next round of acquisitions
Mhm.
because the opportunity with AI is you could chase every fly ball like within your risk appetite. You
Right.
can really go after it. And so, what I've been saying to friends just as I've been chewing on this, is I think it's very possible that you could build, so Banner, I think, is the best term insurer in the country. I think you could build the best term insurer. You could build the best annuity player. You could build the best final expense player. You could build the best
Mhm.
IUL player all within one company
Mhm.
if you really unlock the power of Gen AI for your employees and then empower your partners. And you could do that very, very efficiently because you've reduced a lot of the coordination tasks,
Mhm.
but that's not just using Copilot, right? And like summarizing emails or summarizing,
Right.
chatbots. Like it's fundamental business model reorganization.
Mm. Yeah, it's really investing in the education with your employees and with your partners as it relates to Gen AI, because like you said, a lot of individuals think, oh, I'm using it. Well, I'm using Copilot or ChatGPT, but they're not understanding all of the capabilities. I have a friend who does design thinking, and she has said this to me more than once, that she finds that sometimes large companies are not necessarily even solving for the right problem. And in her work, she helps them do that. And, I've thought about that a little bit, and I've experienced it. to some degree. So I do find that fascinating. Um,
Well,
Marcia,
and just,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and to your point, right? I think your friend is so spot on.
Mhm.
So I've been working with a friend of mine, and we're just building, very simple software solutions that, again, would have taken us weeks, and we're able to crank through them in days, right? Hours, even,
Yes.
and the richness is impressive. And that's where we're just like, oh, you know what? Again, since the cost to generate software, which is the most obvious thing that these models are phenomenally good at,
Right.
has gone effectively to zero, right? So it's virtually free. Again, there's maintenance costs, there's tokens, there's inference, whatever, but you know the key bottleneck before has been removed. And so now I think what prizes it is taste and judgment,
Yeah.
right? Because yeah, you could build everything and you could build it quickly, but if it's wrong, right,
Mm.
or it's poorly thought through, then you're gonna have a whole world of like maintenance challenges, scaling challenges, security vulnerabilities that you
Right.
might not be even aware of.
Right. Yeah. And that can be very scary for individuals. And there have been examples out there. Companies have made those mistakes using generative AI and have had to kind of walk back some of that. I think, again, to your point about, as leaders, as managers, as entrepreneurs, as you are a successful entrepreneur, and here you are again, you understand that while the companies that are succeeding are moving quickly, they're also moving thoughtfully and they're understanding what they're doing. And perhaps removing some layers, because I know a lot of times in an enterprise situation, there are a lot of checks and balances, and I understand that, but that also can weigh down how long decisions take to make before
Yeah.
you're able to move on whatever that platform is, or whatever that, removing friction, or whatever it is that you're aiming to achieve. So when we talk about prime life, what's living longer, living better, how does that change what life insurance is supposed to be, in your opinion?
Yeah. Great question. I mean, and to tie it in, I think with longevity, right? Life insurance originally was just, it was a life expectancy, right? So a single number on an
Mhm.
actuarial table. And again, I think over the next 5, 6 years, you just look at like GLP-1 agonists, right? Like that,
Right.
you know, and again, people think of it as a weight loss mortality like drug, but I think there are a bunch of other, implications to it, right? So people are living longer, but health span and lifespan, have started to separate.
Yes.
And then so I think, the life that we're going to live for the next 50 years, 40 years, whatever, however long we have on this earth, it's going to be really, really different, right? So like multi-generational caregiving, you
Mhm.
know post-retirement income gaps, right? Long-term care, cognitive decline, like these are all like protection problems at the death benefit at claim model was never really built to solve, right?
Right.
And so
Mhm.
I think that's where you get this evolution,
Mhm.
from a contract where, whether you call it living benefits or whatever, where really needs to support that whole arc, right? Or at the minimum, you need a great advisor who can make sure that your retirement, your financial security is covered, with decumulation, certainty and guarantees, plus, the downside mortality protection, right? And how do you do that effectively within a budget? Um, and I think that's, something that's completely different, and trying to be able to make sure that people's financial plans could
Mhm.
be built with clarity and security and trust, is something that, I think is definitely going to play out, as we continue to see, huge changes, that we're experiencing.
I agree with that. And we've also talked about, a lot of times individuals are looking at their balance sheet, but they're not thinking about um, that, lifetime guaranteed income, or how will, when their paycheck stops, what will replace that. And getting back to what you were saying about multi-generational caregiving, and that's so funny because to me, that harkens back to how people did it many years ago. I mean, people are doing that. I'm Italian, and my parents, they lived in three-family homes, and Nonna lived on the top, and the aunts and uncles lived close by down the street. So if there was a situation, and we did have one in my family many years ago, one of my uncles, his mom passed away during childbirth and left 7 kids behind. All the aunts got together and helped raise them, but they were all close by in proximity. And I talked to a lot of people on Prime Life, and, they've moved far away from their parents, or some people don't have children. And so, who's going to take care of them? Some of them have the financial wherewithal, but then it's the who, and finding that trusting individual. So I think the whole retirement, just aging in place, making sure we're protected financially and otherwise is a conversation that will continue to morph. And, like someone reminded me the other day, well, people maybe lived till they were 60 or 70, maybe not even. And now there's that longevity unknown. Like, really, none of us know how long we're going to live. And it's great that some of us are living healthier. We're trying to exercise and eat right. Again, doesn't mean that you're going to not have any health issues, but it's a different retirement outlook, or a
100%.
different, way that, we're living. And I love that you brought that example, again, going back to your original story of that young family that you were talking about, because all of these decisions, whether it's retirement or financial, a lot of times they are multi-generational decisions. And so, again, I think including those individuals when it's needed to make decisions, whether it's life insurance or annuities or long-term care, I think is pivotal.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, Farron, any last insights that you want to share with our audience before I ask my final question?
Well, I would just say, the protection gap, it's not a marketing problem. It's an engineering and an economics problem, right? And I think for the first time in our industry's history with Gen AI, like, we actually have the tools to actually close it, not by selling harder, but by serving the families who we couldn't afford to serve, right? Or who entered our funnel and fell out, and it's just too expensive to go try to re-engage them. And so that's the opportunity. That's the work. That's the shining star ahead of us, right? We can fix those problems and then grow, and then also improve the resiliency of the country.
I love that final part about improving the resiliency of the country. I think that's really important. We ask all of our guests that come on Prime Life, you've had a very interesting career and you can do anything you want. And I know you're a serial entrepreneur, but why do you wake up every day and do what you do?
Yeah, great question. Again, with my kids, it's really just trying to be that role model for them, right? To, like, live the values that, we all want our kids to have, right? Hard work, intellectual curiosity, kindness, passion and purpose. And so that's what I do. So it's like, yeah, I just want to be that better role model for my kids so that they can pursue whatever passions they want. And that's how I think about it.
Well, that's a beautiful answer. And passion, purpose, role model. While I have grown adults, that was always my husband and both of our goals, to do that for them. And now watching them grow, or they are grown, and watching them with their families.
Their kids, yeah.
It's very heartwarming. If an individual would like to get a hold of you, what's the best way? And we'll put everything else in the show notes.
Yeah, so probably the best way to connect is on LinkedIn. I publish a weekly newsletter. I just started. I've done every Thursday, just a strategic view, of things that I use to try to read, to just try to get sense of the mosaic, the landscape. It's called the Weekly Lookout. So that's probably the easiest way to engage.
Well, that sounds great. And I know I'm going to be following you and seeing what you're up to once you're out of stealth mode with AI in this industry, because we need individuals like you making insurance better for everyone. I mean, everyone. So thank you, Farron. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Mary.
For coming on Prime Life podcast, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.